Let's cut through the garbage right now. You've been told your whole life that God is somewhere out there, some old guy in the sky, some unreachable force, some cosmic referee keeping score of your sins. That narrative was handed to you by institutions that profit off your ignorance. Churches, governments, schools, spiritual gurus, they all have one thing in common. They don't want you to know that the source of power you've been searching for is already inside you. You were born with it. Not borrowed, not given on Sundays, not activated by some ceremony. It was there the moment your neurons started firing. But it's been buried by distraction, shame, guilt, and fear. Systematically. Because a human being who knows their divine can't be ruled, can't be sold a savior, and sure as hell can't be controlled. Let's talk facts. Every ancient mystery school, from the Egyptian priesthood to the Gnostics, carried the same core teaching, as within, so without. Not as poetry. Not as metaphor. As operational truth. That means your mind isn't some cloud of thoughts bouncing around. It's the architect of your world. That's not New Age nonsense. That's physics, biology, psychology, all pointing in the same direction. Your nervous system doesn't just experience reality, it filters it. Your subconscious doesn't just store trauma, it projects the lens through which you interpret everything. Now here's the kicker, that architecture was meant to be godlike. That's the design. But it's been hijacked. You've been conditioned to see yourself as a worker, a follower, a sinner, a broken animal crawling toward salvation. They trained you to beg for power instead of recognizing you were born with it. The Kybalion talks about the first Hermetic principle, the all is mind. That's not religious philosophy. That's an equation. If everything is mental, if the universe itself is consciousness, then the observer, you, has more creative power than you've been allowed to believe. The walls around your life are mostly made of belief systems. Invisible. Inherited. Reinforced every damn day. Let's test this right now. Ask yourself, who taught you to pray? Who taught you that you need to earn forgiveness? Who decided that guilt is holy and self-doubt is humility? It wasn't you. Those programs were installed without your permission. You were born intuitive, curious, boundaryless. Then they caged you with shame and told you God approves. They framed divinity as an external boss with a scorecard. But that's not ancient spirituality. That's institutional programming. In original esoteric teachings, God wasn't a character. It was consciousness itself, the field of intelligence you tap into when your mind stops being a slave to outside control. And here's the uncomfortable part, that means you are responsible. Not just for your thoughts. For your frequency, your reality, your creation. You can't outsource your divinity. No one's coming to save you. No savior, no prophet, no cosmic dad. It's all you, and it always was. The moment you internalize that, everything shifts. That's why they fear this knowledge. They don't care if you believe in angels, demons, aliens, or tarot. But if you wake up one day and realize that you're not under God, you're not separate from the divine, that you are a fractal of the same source they pretend only they can access, you're done being controlled. You're done playing small. You're done paying spiritual taxes to institutions that do nothing but manage your fear. And before you think this is just philosophical hype, look around. People who awaken to this truth start to think differently. They stop waiting for permission. They stop asking what they're allowed to do. They get dangerous, not to society, but to the power structures that rely on obedience. Because here's the raw truth, the idea of a God within you is the most threatening concept to every top-down system in history. Governments rule you by law. Religions rule you by guilt. Markets rule you by scarcity. But the God within you? That's immune to all of it. A divine being doesn't need approval to exist. It creates the terms of existence. And yet, most people are so indoctrinated, they fear even exploring this idea. You mention you are God and they call it blasphemy. You say divinity is within and they panic. You know why? Because the slave doesn't know what to do when the chains fall off. The idea of total self-responsibility is terrifying when you've spent your life blaming fate, karma, or God for every bad outcome. But here's the truth: if you don't own your godhood, someone else will. And they already are. The system that raised you profits off your confusion. They need you to believe you're small. They need you to believe you're broken. They need you to believe you need saving. Because as long as you believe that, you'll keep giving your time, your energy, your money, and your mind to things that promise you salvation and give you nothing but rules. They teach you to worship light but hide the fact that you generate it. You were never meant to bow. You were built to create, to command, to collapse reality with thought and rebuild it with will. But you've been told that's arrogance. That's pride. That's evil. They lied. Not with words. With structure. With silence. With repetition. And most people never question it. But you're not most people, or you wouldn't still be listening. Let's talk about the mechanics. Because too many people think unlocking the God within just means feeling good, meditating, or watching another Netflix doc about ancient wisdom. No. This isn't feel-good crap. This is structure. This is method. This is precision. You want to access what's buried inside you? Then understand the system that's been running your life under the surface. Let's get one thing straight: your mind is programmable. Not metaphorically. Literally. Your subconscious doesn't speak English. It speaks in symbols, repetition, emotion, pattern. That's how advertising works. That's how religious rituals work. That's how cults work. You think repeating a prayer for 20 years is just spiritual devotion? No. That's neuro-linguistic reinforcement. You're looping code into your system. And you don't even know who wrote it. So if you want to unlock anything, the first thing you need to do is audit your internal software. You've got programs running 24/7, some written by your parents, some by your teachers, some by trauma, some by mass media. And you think you're making your own choices? No. You're reacting based on presets that were baked into you before you hit puberty. This is where most people fall apart. Because to reprogram yourself, you have to admit you've been operating on someone else's rules. And let's be real, most people would rather defend their dysfunction than dismantle it. Now listen closely. The Hermetic tradition, yeah, the one they scrubbed out of your school books, laid out the actual steps. Not motivational posters. Not Instagram quotes. Real mechanics. Vibration. Polarity. Mental transmutation. Not just concepts, tools. You learn to shift your emotional frequency not by thinking happy thoughts, but by understanding how thought generates waveform, how waveform controls biology, how biology shapes decision-making, and how decision-making determines destiny. But of course, nobody teaches you this. Because if people actually knew they could shift their emotional frequency like tuning a dial, they wouldn't need pills. They wouldn't need sermons. They wouldn't need therapists to hold their hand through every childhood wound. They'd sit down, access the file, rewrite the code, and move on. Let me give you something concrete. You ever noticed how quickly you shift into fight or flight mode? That's your amygdala hijacking your nervous system. It doesn't ask permission. It reacts to a threat pattern based on memory. Which means your body is literally living in the past unless you intervene. Unless you train it. Unless you take over the console. And no, yoga isn't going to do it. Not on its own. You don't stretch your way into godhood. You confront your internal structure line by line. You catch the impulse before it becomes behavior. You interrupt the loop. You create a new loop. You reinforce it. You repeat it. Then you scale it. That's how transformation works. Not one vision board and a prayer. Not a sound bath and some sage. Now let's hit polarity, because this one's been butchered into pop nonsense. Love and light cults will tell you to ignore your negative emotions, pretend everything's high vibe, and smile through your own collapse. That's spiritual malpractice. The principle of polarity isn't about ignoring darkness, it's about mastering it. You don't pretend the other pole doesn't exist. You learn how to swing it. Think of your emotional state like a pendulum. You don't eliminate one side. You learn how to move it at will. That means when you feel rage, you don't suppress it, you study its origin, you control the charge, you redirect the power. Same with grief. Same with fear. That's alchemy. Not running from the fire, but weaponizing it. They've conditioned you to fear your shadow, because they know your shadow contains raw power. They want you soft, fragile, crying into a crystal instead of using your pain as fuel. And let me be real here, if you've been stuck in the same emotional cycles for years, it's not because you're broken, it's because you've never been taught how to flip the switch. They gave you therapy. They gave you pills. They gave you coping. But they never gave you command. And here's where people get uncomfortable. Because unlocking power means accepting total responsibility for your state. Not partial. Total. That means no more blaming your ex. No more blaming your childhood. No more blaming your DNA. You either run the system or the system runs you. And most of you watching right now, you've been passengers in your own bodies. You watch your emotions happen. You watch your patterns play out. Like you're a guest in your own mind. That's over. Because the moment you understand you can change your emotional state on demand, you become lethal to the system. And I'm not exaggerating. You think empires are afraid of guns? They're afraid of people who can't be manipulated. People who can't be gaslit. People who don't need authority to validate their existence. You ever wonder why every elite group, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, whatever, studied hermetic laws behind closed doors? Because this isn't superstition. This is operational sovereignty. It's how the game works. And if you're not using it, it's being used on you. But hey, you can ignore it. Go back to your affirmations and manifestation journals. Or you can wake the hell up and realize this isn't about believing. It's about execution. Let's talk about the parasites. Not energetic ones. Not symbolic ones. Real people. Flesh and blood manipulators, humans who figured out a long time ago that if you want power, the fastest way to get it is by hijacking belief. And nothing sells harder than divine authority. You want to control people? Don't point a gun at them. Put on a robe, speak in riddles, and tell them you have a hotline to God. Tell them you're the only translator of the infinite. Then watch them hand over their minds, their money, their kids, their boundaries. No force necessary. This isn't theory. It's a pattern. Cults, megachurches, ashrams, spiritual influencers, they all use the same script. Flatter your potential, shame your past, sell you a process. Repeat until loyalty replaces logic. Don't believe it? Go look at how many self-proclaimed gurus have a fleet of abused followers behind them. It's not a bug. It's the business model. Let's get into specifics. You ever heard of spiritual transmission? That's when a guru tells you they can give you enlightenment through their gaze, their touch, their energy field. And people fall for it. They start hallucinating, shaking, crying, thinking they just had a divine awakening. No, they were just emotionally cracked open by a high-pressure room and weeks of psychological priming. That's not godhood. That's group hypnosis. That's orchestrated vulnerability dressed up as mystical power. And these masters of light? They love keeping you off balance. One day you're praised as a prodigy, the next you're spiritually regressing. One week you're ascending, the next you're told you have karmic blocks and need another $5,000 retreat to fix it. It's classic trauma bonding. Love bomb, destabilize, isolate, control. That's not sacred mentorship. That's textbook cult leadership. Now here's the dirty part nobody wants to talk about. A lot of these leaders aren't even spiritually deluded. They're strategic. They know exactly what they're doing. They know how to read a room. They know how to detect weakness, mirror it back as insight, and manipulate your trauma response into devotion. They call it awakening. I call it spiritual hostage-taking. You think this is rare? Start digging. The pattern repeats across continents, religions, ideologies. They all brand themselves differently. Some wear beads, some wear suits, some live stream from luxury retreats, but the playbook is the same. Claim inner divinity, position yourself as the only one who's unlocked it, then monetize the access. And the worst part? People defend their abusers. Just like battered spouses. Just like cult members. Because once someone's ego is wrapped around an identity, I'm chosen, I'm awakening, I'm part of something special, they'll do anything to protect that story. Even if it means denying obvious exploitation. Even if it means sacrificing their bank account, their time, or their autonomy. You want to know how deep this goes? Go look up the court cases. The ones buried under NDAs and settlements. Look at the children who grew up inside these communities. The ones with stories of silence, coercion, abuse. You think they're rare? No. They're just ignored. Because exposing a spiritual figure means challenging the beliefs of hundreds, thousands, sometimes millions of followers. And nobody wants to touch that grenade. It's not just cults. It's mainstream now. Your favorite Instagram mystic with 6 sponsorships and a chakra merch line? Half of them are running the same manipulation cycles. Only it's dressed up in pastel colors, yoga quotes, and faux positivity. They use trauma as marketing. They mine your pain for content. You're not a student to them. You're a conversion metric. And let's be real, this isn't about spirituality. It's about control. These people don't care if you reach your higher self. They care if you pay to reach your higher self. And if you don't, you're labeled not ready, still in ego, or blocking your own growth. In other words, your resistance becomes their proof of superiority. It's intellectual gaslighting with a spiritual accent. Here's the uncomfortable truth: most of the people selling you the God within idea don't want you to actually find it. Because the second you do, you stop needing them. Their entire empire relies on your dependence. They sell freedom but build addiction. They preach sovereignty but demand submission. They use the language of divinity to keep you spiritually codependent. And when you call them out, you're projecting. You're attacking the divine. You're in your shadow. No accountability. No apology. Just more mental gymnastics designed to protect the throne. Because that's all it is, or a throne. Built on your desperation. Maintained by your confusion. You want to find real power? Stop looking at the guru. Look at the architecture. The structure. The dynamics. That's where the real story is. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And once you recognize it, you can start to dismantle it, not just in others, but in yourself. Because the most dangerous guru is the one living in your own head, whispering you're not enough until someone else validates you. Let's stop pretending the Hermetic tradition is some sacred, untouchable thing. The way people talk about it now, you'd think Hermes Trismegistus was holding TED Talks in Atlantis. Here's the reality: most of the Hermetic wisdom floating around today is just rebranded self-help wrapped in mystical language. People don't read the real texts. They read summaries of summaries. They quote the Kybalion like it's scripture and pretend that's the core of Hermeticism. Spoiler, it's not. Let me break this down. The Kybalion wasn't written by ancient sages. It was written in 1908 by 3 anonymous guys calling themselves the 3 Initiates. That's not ancient. That's post-industrial. And yet people parrot it like it came down from the pyramids on golden tablets. It's not Hermeticism. It's a mashup of New Thought, a bit of Rosicrucianism, and some surface-level takes on metaphysics. But sure, go ahead and quote as above, so below, like you just unlocked the universe. The actual Hermetica? That's dense, messy, full of contradictions, and most importantly, it was never meant to be a lifestyle brand. It's philosophical, theological, psychological. And it doesn't spoon-feed you the 7 principles in a neat TikTok carousel. You've got dialogues between Hermes and his son, Pimander, Asclepius, texts that question the nature of the divine, the mind, the cosmos. No bullet points. No catchphrases. Just raw, unfiltered philosophical grappling with reality. You don't sell that with incense and a dream journal. But the commercial version? That's clean. That's safe. That's profitable. So now you've got people making entire careers pretending that quoting the principle of vibration makes them enlightened. They recite jargon they barely understand, act like they've transcended the matrix, and charge $999 for vibration coaching. It's not wisdom. It's branding. And here's where it gets dirty, because the real Hermetic thinkers? They didn't just explore power. They explored limitation. They dissected the structure of illusion and control. They weren't selling empowerment. They were breaking down reality at its most fundamental level. They were saying, hey, maybe you're not who you think you are, and maybe the gods aren't what you think they are either. They were willing to burn it all down mentally. Today's spiritual influencers won't even question their own affirmations. You want controversial? Let's talk about how early Christian Gnostics borrowed from Hermeticism and then got annihilated by institutional religion. The Valentinian texts. Blatantly Hermetic. So were some of the Sethian systems. These weren't fringe ideas. They were direct threats to the church. Because they didn't say or worship God. They said understand God. Internalize it. Deconstruct it. Deify yourself. Can't have peasants walking around thinking they're divine. That undermines the entire pyramid scheme of salvation. So guess what happened? The real Hermetic teachings got buried, fragmented, burned. And centuries later, watered-down versions got revived by 19th century occultists who needed something to sell to bored upper-class mystics. They didn't resurrect Hermeticism. They commodified it. And now it's a marketing tool. Aesthetic spirituality for people who want to sound deep but never risk cognitive dissonance. The real problem? Nobody wants to deal with nuance. The real Hermetica forces you to confront ambiguity, paradox, contradiction. It doesn't hand you answers. It shreds your certainty. But today's spiritual thought leaders want scripts, not systems. They want digestible, Monaizable doctrine. They want to sound like ancient sages without doing the actual work of thinking. And they'll gaslight anyone who challenges them. You question the Kybalians' relevance? You're told you're not evolved. You bring up actual Hermetic scholarship? You're told you're stuck in your head. Because facts ruin the illusion. Because critical thinking isn't profitable. Let's take this further. The Kybalion talks about the principle of gender, this idea that everything has masculine and feminine energy. Great. Except they took that and turned it into spiritualized gender stereotypes. Masculine equals logic and action. Feminine equals intuition and receptivity. So now you've got influencers using metaphysics to reinforce 1950s gender roles in New Age packaging. And nobody calls it out because it's all energy talk. It's coded language that sounds inclusive but quietly shoves people back into boxes. And don't even get me started on polarity. The way it's sold now, you'd think polarity just means be more masculine if you're a man, be more feminine if you're a woman. That's not polarity. That's spiritualized sexism. Real polarity is the dynamic interplay of forces that transcend form. It's not about your behavior. It's about energetic dynamics that operate on every level of reality. But they dumb it down into gender war clickbait because nuance doesn't go viral. Here's the deal: if your version of Hermeticism doesn't challenge your identity, your ego, your worldview, it's not Hermeticism. It's comfort food. If you're not wrestling with contradiction, you're not in it. You're just quoting slogans. You want to activate divinity? Then get ready to bleed for it. Because the people selling you endless light and peace forgot to mention one thing: awakening isn't pretty. It's not a montage of glowing chakras and deep exhalations over a beach sunset. It's demolition. It's watching your identity disintegrate piece by piece while everything you used to trust becomes suspect, including your own thoughts. This is the part they never put in the marketing. The part where the so-called divine within it drags you through every unresolved trauma, every fake personality you built to survive, every belief system that kept you comfortable. You don't wake up by meditating for 5 minutes a day and journaling about gratitude. You wake up when your life goes sideways and all your spiritual tools stop working. That's when it begins. That's when the mask breaks. You start seeing the glitch in real time. Your job feels fake. Your relationships feel transactional. Your ambitions feel implanted. You realize you've been performing your entire life for your parents, your culture, your imaginary self-image. You start noticing how much of your personality is a reaction to things that hurt you years ago. And here's the catch: you can't unsee it. You're stuck in the in-between. Not fully awakened, not asleep anymore, and totally unable to go back to pretending. Welcome to the initiation. You ever heard of ego death? Everyone loves to throw the term around like it's a badge. Most people haven't even brushed it. Real ego death isn't some blissful DMT trip where you merge with cosmic light and come back enlightened. Real ego death feels like dying. Literally. Your nervous system panics. Your sense of identity collapses. You don't know who you are, what to believe, or why you're even doing any of this. And the worst part? No one around you understands. You start sounding insane to your friends. You become the weird one. The obsessive one. The one who's going through something. You get isolated. That's part of the process. Because awakening is not socially acceptable. Not real awakening. You stop playing the game. You stop lying to make others comfortable. You become unmanageable, unpredictable, unfiltered. You lose people. You get betrayed. Your circle shrinks. Your finances might crash. Your health might collapse. And all of it gets branded as part of the path, but nobody tells you how long it'll last. Days? Months? Years? No answers. Just silence, detachment, and relentless inner chaos. You start dealing with what people call the dark night of the soul. Cute name. Sounds poetic. It's not. It's a blackout. It's spiritual suffocation. Your guides go silent. Your intuition feels broken. Everything you trusted before feels like a scam. You beg for clarity and get nothing. You scream at the sky and hear your own voice echo back. And during all of it, the temptation to quit is overwhelming. To go back to ignorance. To numb it all. To reattach to the matrix and pretend none of this ever started. But here's the raw truth: there's no going back. You saw too much. You exposed the wiring underneath your entire life. And now you have to rebuild. From scratch. And the hardest part? You can't copy anyone. No template. No 5-step ascension guide. No guru can walk you through it. The process is designed to shatter every external dependency, including the spiritual ones. And let's get real. This kind of unraveling? It doesn't just affect your emotions. It hits your biology. People going through deep spiritual transformation report panic attacks, chronic fatigue, sleep disruption, body pain with no medical explanation, emotional surges that feel like psychosis. And the system? It doesn't help. You go to a doctor, they put you on meds. You go to a therapist, they diagnose you with depersonalization. Because from the outside, it does look like you're breaking down. And technically, you are. But it's not dysfunction. It's deconstruction. There's a difference. Now you want to talk about danger? This is where people crack. Because when you're ripped out of your identity and not grounded in new reality, you're vulnerable. Your brain is scrambled, your body is in fight or flight, and your need for stability skyrockets. That's when the parasites show up. The cults, the charismatic leaders, the spiritual salesmen. They show up with answers, with language that mirrors your experience, with a solution that only they can offer. And if you're not sharp, if you're not brutally honest with yourself, you get captured again. New matrix, same prison. But there's another trap. The internal one. Your own ego morphs. It doesn't die. It adapts. It becomes the awakened one. The teacher. The guide. The one who's done the work. Suddenly, you're preaching before you've even rebuilt. You start performing your healing. You start selling it. And just like that, you're right back in delusion. Wearing a new costume. Different language, same loop. No one talks about this. No one tells you that transformation will gut you. That it'll ruin your social life, destabilize your mind, and set fire to your certainty. That it's violent, not graceful. Chaotic, not linear. Necessary, but never safe. And before you start fantasizing about how glorious it'll be when you come out the other side, let me stop you. That's another trap. Because the other side is a myth. There is no finish line. No final level. No ultimate breakthrough. There's just deeper layers of illusion to strip. One mask after another. One lie after another. Forever. Still want to be divine? Good. Then understand, awakening isn't an experience. You want to know the punchline no one ever tells you about unlocking the God within? It doesn't end in freedom. Not automatically. Not even close. The second you start to tap into that kind of power, you step into a whole different trap, one that looks nothing like the old one but cuts just as deep. This isn't about escaping the matrix. This is about realizing that awakening doesn't remove the system. It forces you to build a new one, and you become the architect, the ruler, the judge, and the prisoner, all at once. Let's go back in history. Every civilization that obsessed over gods eventually started producing men who thought they were gods. Pharaohs in Egypt claimed divine bloodlines. Emperors in Rome demanded worship. Kings ruled by divine right. They didn't just believe in gods, they declared themselves gods. And that wasn't some delusion. It was strategy. Because when a man becomes God in the eyes of others, he controls law, morality, reality itself. That's not freedom. That's total responsibility, and most people aren't built for it. Fast forward to today, modern spirituality pretends it's different. It's not. You're still being taught to ascend, to reach, to evolve into some higher version of yourself that floats above human limitation. But the second you actually get there, when you start accessing real power, mental clarity, emotional control, energetic impact, you don't float. You fall into a paradox. Because now you have to live with the consequences of your own authority. No more gods to blame. No more external devils. Just you. You become the cause and the solution. You're the one who manifests. You're the one who attracts. You're the one who repels. So when your life crashes, it's on you. When your relationships collapse, it's on you. When your divine mission gets hijacked by your own ego, it's not sabotage, it's self-inflicted. Let's talk mechanics. As you ascend in awareness, your influence expands. Your thoughts hit harder. Your energy carries more weight. You walk into rooms and people feel you before you speak. That sounds amazing, until you realize that your internal state is now shaping your external environment whether you want it to or not. You're no longer just reacting to the world. You're creating it in real time. You don't get to be careless anymore. Every mood becomes a command. Every belief becomes a blueprint. And here's where the prison builds itself. The more people see you as awakened, the less freedom you actually have. You're not allowed to be angry anymore. You're not allowed to be confused. You're not allowed to screw up. You're held to an impossible standard, not by others, but by yourself. Because now you know better. You know how to shift energy. You know how to regulate thought. So when you don't, when you fail, the guilt cuts 10 times deeper. And you can't run back to ignorance. You already opened the door. That's the trap of godhood. And let's not pretend this is some rare spiritual thing. Look around. Silicon Valley CEOs with messiah complexes. Politicians who think they're chosen. Influencers preaching like prophets. Power always creates the illusion of divinity, and divinity always creates the demand for perfection. That's not liberation. That's pressure. That's collapse waiting to happen. You want a historical example? Look at Aleister Crowley, the great beast. The man who said, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." He broke from all religious control, claimed divine will as the highest authority, and what happened? He ended up lost in drugs, chaos, and contradiction. Because there's a razor-thin line between freedom and self-destruction when no one is watching you from above. Crowley didn't fall because he was wrong, he fell because he was alone with the consequences of his own divinity. That's the real cost of unlocking godhood. People fantasize about God consciousness like it's an upgrade. In reality, it's a burn protocol. Your old self burns. Your old excuses burn. Your dependencies, your victimhood, your beliefs, they all burn. And after that, you don't get applause. You get silence. The same people who once worshipped your potential now expect miracles on demand. Your failures become case studies. Your doubts become hypocrisy. You become a symbol, and symbols are not allowed to bleed. You still think becoming like God is a reward? Let's take it to the extreme. Look at the Gnostic texts. Yaldabaoth, the false god, created through ignorance, believed himself to be the only divine being, and built a universe to reflect his misunderstanding. Sound familiar? That's what happens when you unlock power but don't purify your perception. You start creating prisons and calling them kingdoms. You manufacture laws, systems, realities, and then get trapped in them. That's not fiction. That's psychology. That's history. That's human behavior amplified through spiritual delusion. Here's what no one wants to say out loud: you can awaken into another matrix. One that you built. One that's shinier, deeper, more enlightened, but still a construct. And because you made it, you'll defend it harder. You'll justify its rules. You'll gaslight yourself when it starts to suffocate you. And then the cycle starts again, only now you're the warden. This is the other side of the awakening most people never reach. The part where you realize that unlocking the God within doesn't give you wings. It gives you mirrors. And those mirrors don't flatter you. They reflect every contradiction, every blind spot, every fragment of control you disguised as empowerment. You wanted the truth. This is it. And if you've made it this far, then maybe, just maybe, you're one of the few who won't flinch when it hits. Thank you for watching till the end. For real. Most people drop out when the illusions get uncomfortable. You stayed. That means something. I appreciate you. See you in the next one.